Welcome back, everyone. We're diving deep into the world of Merriam's turkey today.
Oh, yeah, it's going to be a good one.
We're going way beyond the basics, folks. You ready for this?
Absolutely. I think people will be surprised by how much there is to learn.
We've got appearance, habitat, diet, those fascinating mating rituals, and we're pulling from some really cool research and observations.
Yeah, it's really amazing what you can find when you dig into the source material.
It's easy to just think turkey and picture, the classic Thanksgiving bird.
Right, exactly. But there's so much more to it.
Most people don't realize there are actually different varieties of wild turkey out there.
Yeah. 5 subspecies in North America, to be exact.
That's right. And we're zeroing in on Merriam's, which, fun fact, is named after a prominent American zoologist, Clinton Hart Merriam.
It's quite a legacy to have a whole subspecies named after you, right?
For sure. I mean, we're talking about a guy who was instrumental in mapping out the distribution and diversity of so many North American species.
Yeah, a true pioneer in the field.
So I'm picturing these turkeys strutting around in little lab coats now.
I could see it.
All right, jokes aside, let's get down to business. When we think about the appearance of Merriam's turkey, what are the things that really make them stand out?
Well, first off, picture a bird with a predominantly black body.
Okay, black body, got it.
But it's not just any black. These feathers have this incredible iridescent sheen that reflects, get this, bronze, purple, and green hues when the light hits them just right.
Almost like a natural oil slick.
Exactly. It's really quite striking, especially when you see them in their natural habitat.
Now, that's a fashion statement. So are there any other visual features that set them apart from, let's say, the eastern wild turkey?
Oh, absolutely. One of the most noticeable differences is the white tipping on their tail feathers and lower back.
Those white tips, yeah, I've seen that in pictures. Why is that?
Well, not only does it create a stunning visual contrast, but it might also play a role in camouflage, helping them blend into the dappled sunlight of their mountainous habitats.
Ah, so it's not just for show.
It's form and function, all rolled into one.
I like it. It's like evolution's little design trick.
Exactly. And speaking of size,
Yeah, how big are we talking here?
the males, often called toms, they're the real heavyweights.
Okay, give us the numbers.
They can tip the scales at anywhere from 18 to 30 pounds.
Wow, that's pretty impressive for a bird. And the females.
The females, or hens, are a bit more petite, typically weighing in between 8 and 12 pounds.
Okay, so size-wise, they're definitely contenders for a Thanksgiving feast. But beyond size, what about those classic turkey features, those fleshy bits that give them so much character?
You mean the snood, the wattle, and those caruncles?
Yes, all those fun terms. I love that they have actual names for those things.
Well, those fleshy growths on their heads and necks are present in both sexes, but they're much more pronounced in the males.
Why is that?
They play a crucial role in communication and, you guessed it, courtship displays, which we'll definitely dive into a bit later.
I'm already picturing it. All right, let's shift gears a bit and talk about their habitat. Where would we find these fashionable turkeys in the wild?
Well, unlike their eastern cousins who prefer dense forests, Merriam's turkeys are true mountain dwellers.
So mountain lovers. I wouldn't have guessed that.
Yep. Think high elevations, rugged landscapes, the whole 9 yards.
So where geographically would we find them?
Primarily in the western United States, Colorado, New Mexico, Arizona, Montana, Wyoming. They're pretty widespread throughout those mountainous regions.
That makes sense. What is it about those mountainous habitats that makes them so appealing to Merriam's turkeys?
It's all about resources and adaptation. Those open woodlands, ponderosa pine forests, and mixed coniferous habitats provide them with the perfect balance of food sources, safe roosting sites high up in the trees, and cover to avoid predators.
So those mountains are like their perfect playground.
In a way, yeah. And their adaptability is pretty remarkable. They've actually been successfully introduced to other states and even parts of Canada.
No kidding. So they're branching out, expanding their horizons.
That's one way to put it.
Now let's talk turkey food. What fuels these mountain-dwelling birds?
Well, Merriam's turkeys are what we call opportunistic omnivores, meaning they're not picky eaters. They have a varied diet and will take advantage of whatever food sources are available to them. We're talking seeds, nuts, berries, grasses, and even insects.
That makes a lot of sense, especially in those sometimes harsh mountain environments.
Exactly. And they've really mastered the art of adapting their diet to the changing seasons.
Oh, so like a seasonal menu for these turkeys.
You could say that. And spring and summer, when fresh vegetation is abundant, they'll graze on grasses, leafy greens, and flowering plants. But come fall and winter, Their focus shifts to hardier fare, like acorns, pine seeds, and other mast crops.
It's amazing how they've adapted to the rhythms of nature like that. What about their foraging technique? How do they actually go about finding all this delicious food?
It's quite a sight. They use those strong feet and sharp claws to scratch the ground, uncovering hidden seeds, insects, and roots.
So they're like little turkey gardeners, constantly tilling the soil.
In a way, and this isn't unique to Merriam's turkeys, it's a behavior common to all wild turkeys.
Ah, so an ancestral technique passed down through generations.
Exactly. A little piece of turkey heritage.
I love it. Now, speaking of fascinating behaviors, we have to talk about their breeding season. I'm sensing things get a little bit dramatic in the springtime, am I right?
You could say that. Spring is when the toms really get to strut their stuff. It's a time of elaborate courtship displays, fierce competition, and of course, a whole lot of gobbling.
Oh, yeah, the gobbling. It's iconic.
Have you ever witnessed those courtship displays in person?
I haven't, but I can only imagine it's quite a show.
Oh, it is. It really is.
Yeah.
Imagine this, a male Merriam's turkey, all puffed up to twice his normal size, feathers iridescent in the sunlight, fanning his tail into this magnificent semicircle.
Like he's showing off all his best assets.
Exactly. And all while emitting these deep, guttural gobbles that echo through the forest.
Wow, that sounds pretty intense. So the females must be pretty impressed by all that.
I'm sure they are. Assuming all goes well, and she's sufficiently impressed, mating takes place.
Makes sense. And then?
And then, the female sets about the task of nest building. She'll choose a well-concealed spot on the ground, often under a bush or a fallen log, and lay between 8 and 12 eggs.
So the females really take the lead when it comes to nesting and raising the young.
They do. For about 28 days, she'll diligently incubate those eggs until they hatch, rarely leaving the nest.
That's some serious dedication. And what about those little turkey chicks? What are they called, by the way?
They're called poults, and they're what we call precocial.
Precocial, meaning?
Meaning they're born covered in downy feathers, ready to walk, and even forage for food almost immediately.
Wow, so they hit the ground running, so to speak.
Exactly. That's a huge advantage for survival in their habitat.
It has to be, especially with all those predators lurking about.
You're right. It's a tough world out there for a young poult.
What are some of the biggest threats to their survival?
Well, predation is a constant concern. We're talking bobcats, coyotes, even birds of prey that see those little poults as easy targets. And then there's habitat loss due to human development. That's a major issue.
Yes, the ever-present human impact.
It's unfortunate, but it's a reality. And then there are the effects of climate change, which can disrupt food sources and nesting success.
It sounds like they're facing an uphill battle, even with all their amazing adaptations.
It is a struggle. But thankfully, there's been a concerted effort to conserve Merriam's turkey populations, and humans are playing a vital role in that.
So there is hope.
Absolutely. Organizations like the National Wild Turkey Federation, in collaboration with state wildlife agencies, have implemented some pretty effective conservation strategies.
Like what? Give us the highlights.
Well, habitat conservation is key, of course, preserving those wild spaces they depend on.
Makes sense.
But there's also regulated hunting, which might sound counterintuitive.
Oh, how does that work?
When managed responsibly, hunting can actually help keep populations in check, preventing overgrazing and competition for resources.
So it's about finding that balance.
Exactly. It's a delicate dance, but when done right, human intervention can really make a difference.
It's inspiring to hear about these collaborative efforts. It shows that we can make a positive impact when we work together.
We absolutely can. And it's not just about the big organizations doing their part. Everyone can contribute to the conservation of these incredible birds.
I love that. We'll have to dive into some of those ways to get involved later on.
Definitely. But for now, I think we've laid a good foundation for understanding what makes Merriam's turkeys so special.
Agreed. We've covered their appearance, habitat, those amazing courtship rituals, and even touched on some of the challenges they face.
And believe me, there's so much more to explore. We'll dive deeper into their unique behaviors and ecological role after a short break.
All right, so we've touched on some of those unique behaviors already, but I'm really curious to learn more about the social dynamics of Merriam's turkeys.
Yeah, it's fascinating stuff.
So outside of that crazy breeding season, what's the typical social scene like for these birds?
Well, outside of the breeding season, Merriam's turkeys are actually pretty social creatures.
Okay, more social than I would have thought.
They tend to form these fairly large flocks, sometimes numbering in the dozens or even hundreds.
Wow, that's a lot of turkeys. What's
Yeah.
the benefit of flocking together like that?
Safety in numbers, of course. Having more eyes and ears on the lookout for predators definitely increases their chances of survival.
Yeah, that makes sense, especially in a habitat with so many potential threats.
Exactly. But as you can imagine, things get a little more interesting when the breeding season rolls around.
Oh yeah, things get a little competitive, don't they?
That's an understatement. As spring arrives and hormones start surging, those peaceful flocks we talked about transform into, well, a bit of a turkey battleground.
A battleground, huh? Paint me a picture.
Picture this. Males vying for dominance, strutting their stuff, trying to outdo each other to attract the attention of receptive females.
So all those courtship displays we talked about earlier, they're not just for the ladies, they're also about showing off to the competition.
Exactly. It's a delicate dance of attraction and intimidation.
So what kinds of behaviors do we actually see during these dominance displays?
Well, we've already talked about those visual cues.
Yeah.
The fanning of tail feathers, the puffed up chests, the gobbling.
Right, right, the whole shebang.
But it can get even more intense than that. Sometimes they'll even engage in physical confrontations.
Like turkey fights.
Pretty much. They use their sharp beaks and powerful legs to clash with each other, sort of like a feathery wrestling match.
Now that's something I'd pay to see. All right, moving beyond the drama of the breeding season for a moment, let's talk about Merriam's turkeys and their role in the bigger picture.
You mean their ecological role?
Exactly. How do they fit into that intricate web of life in their mountain habitats?
Well, they might not be the flashiest creatures in the ecosystem, but they definitely play a vital role.
I'm all ears, tell me more.
As omnivores, they have a significant impact on seed dispersal and the control of insect populations.
Okay, so they're keeping things in check, so to speak.
Right. And their foraging activities, all that scratching and digging we talked about, actually helps to aerate the soil, which benefits plant growth and diversity.
It's amazing how those seemingly simple actions can have such a ripple effect.
It really is. And of course, they also serve as prey for larger predators.
Yeah, nature's circle of life.
Exactly. They contribute to the balance of the food web, ensuring that everything stays in equilibrium.
So they're not just fascinating to observe, they're actually essential components of their ecosystem.
Absolutely. They're a reminder that every creature, no matter how big or small, plays an important part in the grand scheme of things.
I love that perspective. Are there any specific plant or animal species that have a particularly close relationship with Merriam's turkeys?
Well, one interesting example is their relationship with ponderosa pine trees.
Oh yeah, those are pretty iconic in those mountain landscapes.
Right. Merriam's turkeys love those ponderosa pine forests, and they rely heavily on pine seeds as a food source, especially during the colder months.
Okay, so the pines provide food for the turkeys.
Exactly. But it's not just a one-way street. The turkeys, through their foraging activities, actually help to disperse those pine seeds, spreading them to new areas and aiding in forest regeneration.
So it's a win-win situation.
It's a beautiful example of mutualism. Both species benefit from the relationship.
I love those examples of cooperation in nature. It makes you realize just how interconnected everything truly is.
It really does. It's a delicate balance, and it's important to understand those connections if we want to effectively conserve these species.
Speaking of conservation, we talked about some of the challenges Merriam's turkeys are facing, but what about their overall conservation status? Is there reason for optimism?
There definitely is. Thanks to those conservation efforts we discussed, their populations have remained relatively stable in recent years.
So we're heading in the right direction.
We are. But it's an ongoing effort, and we can't become complacent. Climate change, habitat fragmentation, and disease outbreaks are all potential threats on the horizon.
It sounds like their future is very much intertwined with our own actions and choices.
It absolutely is. We have a responsibility to make informed decisions that consider the impact on these incredible creatures and their habitats.
I couldn't agree more. Now, before we wrap up this deep dive, I'm curious, are there any lingering mysteries, any unanswered questions that continue to intrigue researchers and inspire further exploration of Merriam's turkeys?
Oh, there are always more questions than answers when it comes to nature, and that's what keeps things so exciting.
I'm always fascinated by the things we still don't know. What are some of the big questions that are still out there about Merriam's turkeys?
Well, one thing that really intrigues me is their ability to navigate those fragmented mountain landscapes. We've talked about how mobile they are.
Yeah, covering some serious ground.
But we still don't fully understand how they make those decisions. Like, what cues are they using to find their way across such challenging terrain?
It really is remarkable. It's like they have an internal GPS system specifically designed for the mountains.
It's incredible. And researchers